What would you do if you started noticing food missing? Items moved around. Doors left slightly open when you know you closed them. You would probably think you are losing your mind, or maybe that someone is breaking in. But what if the truth was far worse? What if the intruder never left your home? This is Wolf's quest for truth. And tonight, we're reopening the attic door. In the quiet neighborhoods of 1940s Denver, Colorado, a nightmare was unfolding behind the walls of a modest home on 17th Avenue. Street lamps flickered as dusk settled over the city, and the air carried the faint scent of coal smoke and autumn leaves. Most people were inside, unaware of the darkness creeping silently through their world. A man was living there, but he was not a guest. He was not invited. He was hiding in the attic. This is the disturbing true story of Theodore Edward Cooney's, a man whose presence went unnoticed for weeks, whose shadow passed beneath the noses of ordinary citizens. Also known as the Denver Spider-Man, Cooney's life had always been on the margins, a series of small misfortunes that, when strung together, created a perfect storm of desperation and cunning. You have heard urban legends about people secretly living in a house belonging to someone, a stranger lurking in the walls, a shadow that moves when you are not looking. But what if it was not just a story? What if it really happened? Theodore Edward Cooney was born in 1882. From a young age, he was frail, pale, and sickly. Doctors doubted he would live past his 20s. His childhood was quiet and lonely, filled with whispered warnings from relatives who did not understand him and neighbors who stared at his thin frame with suspicion. But Cooney proved them wrong. He grew older, surviving illnesses that should have claimed him, but life offered no kindness in return. He bounced from job to job, often unemployed, frequently homeless, drifting through towns like a ghost who could not be touched. By the 1940s, he returned to Denver, a city bustling with activity, yet he remained unseen, unknown, unwanted. In 1941, desperation made him think of someone he once knew. Philip Peters, a retired auditor who had offered him help long ago. Peters lived alone at 3335 West Moncrief Place. His wife was in a hospital, and he managed the house by himself. Cooney approached the home tentative, hoping for food, for a gesture of kindness, for a handout. But no one answered the door. The house was quiet, empty, waiting. What Cooney did next would set off a chain of events that would haunt Denver for decades. Inside the Peters home is a small attic barely large enough to lie down in. Cooney saw an opportunity. He climbed in and he stayed. Night after night, he descended quietly for scraps of food and water. He lived in silence, in darkness. Unseen. Unknown. Weeks passed. The neighbors noticed nothing. The family, friends, even the local authorities had no inkling that a man was living just above their heads. He became part of the house, a shadow that whispered along the ceiling beams. Then came the night of October 17th, 1941. Philip Peters was in his kitchen when he heard a noise, a subtle creak, a sound too deliberate to be ignored. He was not alone. As he investigated, Cooney emerged from the shadows. Panic seized them both. In a frenzy, Cooney grabbed an old iron stove shaker, striking repeatedly. The sound of metal hitting flesh echoed through the quiet house. Philip Peters collapsed. The motive? survival, or perhaps madness. A man, driven by desperation, striking without thought, without mercy. When neighbors and police arrived, they found no sign of forced entry. No broken windows. No evidence that someone had intruded. Just a dead man in a locked house. Friends and neighbors were baffled. How could someone be murdered and the killer vanish without a trace? Some whispered of robbery gone wrong. Others spoke of ghosts or supernatural forces. But the truth was stranger than fiction. For weeks, Theodore Cooney's had been living inside the house, hidden, silent, watching, waiting. After the murder, life in the Peters home continued as if nothing had changed. Peter's wife returned, unaware of the horror that had occurred in her absence. She heard strange noises, footsteps that should not have been there. Food disappeared inexplicably. Doors were left open. The house felt haunted. She moved out, seeking solace in the normalcy of the outside world. It was then that the police discovered the impossible, a small crawl space above the closet ceiling, barely noticeable, concealing the man who had become a phantom in their lives. Inside it was Theodore Cooney's, crouched in darkness, the embodiment of unseen terror. He had survived for nearly 5 weeks like this, slipping down at night, stealing, observing, hiding. His life had become one long night measured in silence, in fear, in careful calculation. When arrested, he confessed everything. How he had broken into the attic. How he had killed Philip Peters in a moment of desperate violence. How he had returned to the attic even as police searched the house without making a sound. He was sentenced to life in prison, punishment for a life that had been shaped by neglect. The story made headlines across the country. Reporters called him the Denver Spider-Man, a name that would endure long after his death. The house at 3335 Moncrief Place still stands, a reminder of the ordinary turned sinister. Some say it is cursed. Some say if you listen closely at night, you can still hear movement in the attic, whispers of a man who lived between the walls. The tale serves as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the scariest monsters are not creatures of legend, but the ones already inside, waiting, unnoticed, unseen, until desperation or circumstance reveals them. This story is more than a crime. It is a haunting, a glimpse into the fragile line between normalcy and terror. It is a true life horror that stretches the imagination, that forces us to question the shadows in our own homes. And sometimes the stories you hear in the dark, the legends whispered to frightened children, are rooted in reality more chilling than fiction. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing. For more true crime, forgotten legends, and darkness in unexpected places, stay tuned. Until next time, be cautious, stay vigilant, and always check the attic. Sometimes the scariest monsters are not in the dark. They are the ones that hide in plain sight, right above our heads. This was my very first video on Wolf's Quest for Truth. So thank you for watching all the way through. I'm still learning, so sorry for any little mistakes along the way, but every mystery starts somewhere. If you enjoyed this dive into Denver's strangest legend, do not forget to like, subscribe, and join me again on Wolf's Quest for Truth. Until next time, keep your doors locked and your attic closed.